Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Daily Objective. Today I'm joined by James. How's it going, James?
Hi, how are you? Quite well.
I'm not, I'm not too bad. As you say, I'm back on cameras. I'm still a bit under the weather, but I'm not quite as bad as I was. Um,
We can
so
see your handsome, active face.
exactly. Um, so our topic today is we're talking about a story that's emerged about a Al Jazeera journalist. Um, And so Al Jazeera, I think everyone probably knows about Al Jazeera, but is the Qatari state broadcaster. Um, Obviously, in the context of the war in Israel, they take a very particular editorial line, which is sort of very anti-Israel, very pro the Palestinian cause, let's say. Um, and this particular journalist, it's emerged, is not only a member of Hamas, it seems, but the reports, it seems, is saying that he's actually a commander within Hamas. So he's actually got some kind of seniority, and it's emerged not just this, but a wealth of sort of photos of him with rocket-propelled grenades, shaking hands and looking quite bashful in front of Yahya Sinwar and so on and so forth. So it's not just a sort of speculative hypothesis that someone's made. It there's a huge amount of information that's come out about this guy, and it's obviously quite damning for a news agency like Al Jazeera, whose prejudices we know, to have been discovered to have this journalist who's actually a ranking member of Hamas. So, James, tell us a bit about this.
Well, they did. IDF recovered apparently the laptop of this journalist, and he has appeared in recent months repeatedly on Al Jazeera's air with reports. Just doing a simple search, you can see that he's both done online reporting for them as well as on-air reports for Al Jazeera. And this laptop is most damning indeed. They found all kinds of photographs and texts and material, which indicates that he was apparently involved in the aerial defense systems of Hamas itself, Islamic Brotherhood, too. So this guy apparently is helping them with their weaponry. There's all kinds of photographs with him adjusting the weapons, holding the weapons, working on the weapons that Hamas is using. Now, this is obviously going way beyond the job of any journalist here. He's actually assisting them in their aggressive actions against Israel, actually helping them develop their military technology in an active way. And of course, he's in active communication with Hamas. He appears, therefore, from the laptop to actually be a Hamas militant, a member of the organization, taking orders from Hamas or Islamic Jihad or something like that. That's what appears to be the case. Now, Al Jazeera, we all know what their position is. Frankly, it's only slightly different than that of the Guardian. It's only different, slightly different than that of certain U.S. outlets as well. So, would I suspect that someone was cooperating in the violence and wanted and shared Hamas or Islamic Brotherhood's goals, just simply having that political opinion? Of course. But in the case of Al Jazeera, we actually have, as you pointed out, a news agency which is an arm of the state of Qatar. And we know that Qatar is actively harboring Hamas militant leaders. They're, I guess, five-star hotels, Michelin rated hotels in Qatar. So obviously, Qatar is actively militarily aggressive against Israel. Qatar is itself, as I've explained in previous episodes, a valid military target for Israel. Now, whether Israel would want to expand the war like that is another question. But in my mind, morally speaking, Qatar is an enemy of Israel and a legitimate military target, given the fact that they're harboring the killers behind October 7th. So it is, in fact, no surprise whatever that this news agency is actually just a propaganda. It appeared always simply to be a propaganda arm of Hamas. I mean, that was obvious on the face of it. But being an agent of this government, which is actively harboring Hamas militants, as well, should lead us to the direct conclusion that Al Jazeera itself is, well, I'm going to be very, very clear about this. Al Jazeera has itself become a valid military target for Israel. Not only are they propagandizing lies, but they actually have on staff members who are actively helping the militancy of Palestinian terrorist groups. And you know, a few weeks ago, there was all kinds of screaming and crying when two Al Jazeera reporters were killed in IDF raids in Gaza. And Israel reported, and boy, did everyone, they were skeptical. Oh, when Israel said these guys are actually helping the militants, oh, Israel's lying. Do you believe Israel? Israel is just telling us a bunch of nonsense to justify their killing of innocent reporters. Total nonsense. I think sight unseen, I'm now going to believe everything that Israel tells me with respect to Al Jazeera. And Al Jazeera reporters on the ground are valid targets, and I will cheer. I will now cheer every time an Al Jazeera reporter on the scene there gets killed. That is precisely what they deserve. They are actively supporting, and as an organization and as a nation, they're actively supporting the war against Israel.
Yes, and I think early in the war as well. I mean, you mentioned that there was the killing of these two Al Jazeera journalists, but I think early in the war, if I'm remembering correctly, there was an Al Jazeera building in Gaza which was destroyed, and this was treated as a kind of you know, a
A
fracas
war
because
crime.
yeah, exactly, because it and you know the suggestion was, oh, the Israelis they don't want the truth coming out, so they've bombed this building, you know, and actually what they've probably sort of really known all along is that Al Jazeera is not just a news agency, it's a propaganda agency, which is really active, very hostile to their
They
interests.
have, they have been defending the Houthis in their assault on international shipping in the Gulf of Aden in the Red Sea. They have been actively defending that activity as if it's justified. They've been actively defending the attacks on American interests throughout the Middle East. They've been actively spreading every lie you can possibly imagine about this. So it's hardly surprising at all. This is an evil organization. I could morally tell you months ago that this was an evil organization spreading lies. But and in fact, we should have been aware, given the fact that they are really just an arm of the Qatari government, which is actively supporting militants, anti-Israel militants, with and harboring them within their borders, that they were aiding and abetting and part of the entire process of materially assisting the violence against Israel. But now it's painfully obvious that we have multiple specific members who are probably, I mean, it was similar with UNRWA. Remember we said the 12, we'd be hardly be surprised if it turned out to be hundreds or thousands. And in fact, that seems to be the case. Similarly here, I would say that since we have some indication already on one and then maybe a couple of more before, I now, sight unseen, any Al Jazeera reporter on scene is, as far as I'm concerned, an agent of the militants against Israel.
Yes. And so do you think this is going to have an impact on how on people's attitudes, I guess? Because there's a podcast or podcaster now, and an academic and a former British politician who I kind of well used to kind of like. He was a guy called Roy Stewart. Or he is a guy called Roy Stewart, I suppose is the right way to say
It really is
it.
his name.
And I even was sort of part of when he ran for leader of the Tory party. I was even technically part of the effort to help him do that. And what shocked me was after the war broke out, just how sort of bad he was on the war in Israel. And one of the things, and so he has one of the most successful podcasts in the UK. And one of the things that he said to his listeners was when people were saying, can you give it because he's very clued up on the conflict and the history of it. Can you give us any news sources that you think are worth reading? He said, "Oh, you should go read Al Jazeera." And when he said that, I just thought, "Oh, for goodness sake!" And it's not like he's ignorant about the Middle East or what they are. He's sort of lived in Afghanistan extensively, and it's not like he's just stumbled across them and said, "Oh, there's this cool little news site I've come across. He really knows, and so I lost a huge amount of respect for him doing that. And do you think this will change people's attitude? 'Cause so, and spoiler for my view, I don't think so. But because people's because people's attitude against Israel, in the sense Israel has is having to do so much to justify itself and to prove that it's not a bad faith actor, in effect, that it really is doing things to defend itself. Um, so as I say, I don't think this is going to change things at all. But do you think this might have sway with some people for persuading them?
Well, we back through the logic that I just did a bit earlier. If we were unable, if there are people out there who were unable to see that Al Jazeera was promoting just in their line, just in the words, just in the reports, just in their opinions, just in their perspective, was evil, then of course you're not going to see it at this point, are you? You've already blinded yourself to the moral equation here. You're already morally unsound in your thinking. And by that point, you'd have to talk someone, think of all the layers that you're going to have to talk someone out of if they began by saying, well, no, Al Jazeera is just an objective, just another international news agency out there, ignoring the content, ignoring this story. But what was the other great story that we found out? UNRWA headquarters in Gaza, beneath what has this now, we now know that UNRWA, beneath UNRWA HQ in Gaza, was a major militant organization right under, we had tunnels, you got the wires and the cables coming down. Obviously, this was constructed over a period of months. Obviously, the UNRWA organization above could not have missed the construction going on below, the noise going on below, the electricity pumping down below there, et cetera, et cetera. It's obvious. But will that story have much of an impact? Even that story. So you can pile up all these stories that you like. If you're so twisted, see, this is the importance of philosophy. Philosophy actually shapes the way people look at the facts. They will integrate the facts differently depending upon their moral principles. Remember, there is no cognitive process that is purposeless, that doesn't have some he'll use the fancy philosophical word, a teleological end. I mean, these people, it's clear that their heads are warped, if I can use the simple language. They're warped to the point that they see Israel as no better than the Hamas militants they're fighting. If your head is that warped, there's no getting through to you. This UNRWA organization, I don't care. I mean, listen to the way they even talk about it. Well, how are we going to educate the young people of Gaza without UNRWA? Well, educate them. The education they were getting was go kill Jews and martyr yourself to do it. That was the essence of the education that they were getting. So we want to stop that, ladies and gentlemen. We don't want to perpetuate that. But similarly, I could say the same of Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera is an evil organization. It's anti-Semitic. It is defending the worst kind of violent savagery and doesn't care if the war extends and wants the war, in effect, to extend. And it buys into the whole Hamas propaganda line. Now, when Western media outlets buy into the Hamas, civilian, 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 that is the Hamas propaganda line. They use their own civilians. So all these Western outlets, themselves taken in by the Hamas line, when they hear it said by Al Jazeera, of course, they're no different than the New York Times or the Guardian, are they?
Hmm.
They're no different than, BBC or CNN. No, ladies and gentlemen, while they share your warped perspective, they are actually active militants. That's really the only difference, frankly. That's really the only difference, frankly. But morally speaking, they're in the same boat as far as I see it.
Yes, something which was well, funny up until I guess suppose you realized how serious it was on Twitter. Um, because my favorite new Twitter feed is Eitan Fishberger's Twitter feed, who we had on the channel. So he was tweeting a lot about the Hamas base that was found underneath the UNRWA headquarters. Um, and everyone should go and have a look at that because, as you mentioned, the image of the wires going through the floor is quite telling. And people were sort of screenshotting a tweet that came out by Philippe Lazzarini, who is the kind of chief consulate or chief whatever of UNRWA. and he was saying UNRWA had no idea that this base was underneath the UNRWA headquarters. And the wires, it's a thick bunch of wires which are cut, which are clearly sort of hastily or haphazardly coming from the wall and running into the floor. And you can, and just like a comedy skit, again, I don't want to be, too flippant about it. You can just imagine the kind of, the demolitions are going on underneath the base to the headquarters to build it, and the people in UNRWA are thinking, goodness, what is that? I have no idea. I shouldn't ask.
Those are just the mole people who live beneath the earth, don't you know?
Yeah,
No, it's
exactly.
insane. It's risible. It really is. It's a laugh the way
Yeah.
they're trying to defend that. You see how it's really a mental warping that has occurred. They really think they can get away with that kind of a lie. But like I say, a world that is so morally blind that they can't really see the evil. Look, they can't even see the correct response to the evil of October 7th. That is how morally warped people are about these sort of things. They don't see that by appeasing it, you create more of it. They don't see that Israel actually has a right to defend itself. And if you can't see that, then of course you are intellectually an aid to the terrorists, in effect. And so what needs to happen, obviously, is rethinking. And I believe, let's do a little history lesson. There were all kinds of people who were idealistically communists in the 1930s, 1920s, 1940s, even. But when the news about what Stalin was came out, and the horrors of Stalin, basically intentionally starving tens of millions of people, including people in the Ukraine, by the way, in large numbers, the more honest leftist intellectuals in the West, your George Orwells, developed an anti-Stalinist far left. Now, do you see any of that sign of sort of an anti-Hamas far left developing? I do not. On the other hand, there might be individuals out there who, seeing the facts before their eyes about UNRWA or Al Jazeera being active participants in the violence against Israel, those more honest people should check their consciences, check their premises, and like the more honest communists of yore, 80, 90 years ago, when the facts about your noble experiment in the Soviet Union come out, or when the facts about what's going on in Gaza and what Al-Jazeera are and what UNRWA is come out, then you want to check your premises, rethink the whole situation. Even if you're philosophically not an objectivist, these are simple facts, ladies and gentlemen, that the more honest person should confront. If they're not, they are not intellectually honest. And so let me draw the line right here. I'm going to draw a little line right here. After the revelations about UNRWA, after the revelation now about Al Jazeera, it is a test of intellectual honesty. Everyone who does not rethink, if they're on anti-Israel side, anyone who does not rethink their position at this point is intellectually warped, dishonest, and immoral to that extent. There are more than enough facts here, to condemn the United Nations involvement in Gaza, to condemn Al Jazeera's reporting as actively involved in the defense of the militancy going on there. You just it's real test now. It's a clear acid test of intellectual honesty, as far as I can see.
Yes. And so, this guy's name, I suppose, just save people, is Mohammed Washash. I think I'm pronouncing his name correct.
Yes.
And
Washa or something like that. Yeah.
yeah, and so just in the same way that for the head of UNRWA or employees of UNRWA, if they actually didn't know that there was this base beneath their headquarters, it's a kind of criminal irresponsibility, really.
Yeah.
We would have to say again for Al Jazeera, if the Al Jazeera higher ups or his immediate peers in the newsroom didn't know that he was kind of moonlighting as a terrorist in effect. Um,
My day job is reporting for Al Jazeera, but on the weekends and evenings, I'll do aerial weaponry for Hamas or Islamic Brotherhood. Right, got it.
so it stretches credulity too far, doesn't it? And so, as you say, what we should really be seeing from people, and unfortunately, I don't think we're really going to see it, is people saying, you know, the tone of the reporting in the war so far has been so anti-Israel from these sources that has so clearly been involved on, we've just discovered this one journalist so far, and just as with these UNRWA employees, are we going to discover that it's actually so many more? Um, the reporting's been so biased and has painted such a negative picture for it against Israel and is so clearly involved in a lot of anti-Semitism. We should now, rethink, even if, because let's say it's not going to change their philosophy of these news stories, even if we think, okay, we need to do X, Y, and Z to protect more civilians or whatever, we should seriously rethink why it is that we were so easily taken in by this kind of anti-Israel line. And I would
Correct.
really love to see that kind of renaissance in people's thought, and that would honestly be very restorative to my faith in people. But
Yeah, but don't hold your breath, my friend.
sure.
I don't expect it anytime soon. No, I wish I could be more sanguine about it, but I cannot. I cannot, my brother. But look, when the prime minister or when the president of the United States give press conferences, they can't include reporters from every journalistic outfit in the world. They cannot. They have to be selective. And let me suggest it is no censorship if Al Jazeera is no longer invited to press conferences at the State Department or at Whitehall or you see what I'm saying? The civilized world should say, no, Al Jazeera is no longer a legitimate, they're an active participant in this war. They're no longer a legitimate journalistic organization. They should be given the boot. And that's not any kind of censorship, ladies and gentlemen. If Whitehall or Congress is not taking questions from Al Jazeera, that's not censorship. These people are active participants in militancy against Israel. And if, on the other hand, civilized Western countries allow them that sanction, allow them to be regarded as a legitimate news organization, then of course we are ourselves sanctioning the violence against Israel precisely to that degree. But all those press credentials for the Al Jazeera reporters, at the White House or, at number 10 or the Whitehall, they should be revoked. They should be revoked. Al Jazeera should be kicked out. They shouldn't be part of the press conferences that members of Congress or MPs give, much less the prime minister or the president. Come on.
Yeah, and I suppose again, if this is, I sometimes feel the need to really kind of drive these points home to people, but if we were to imagine that, so pick any mainstream Western news organization, whether it's the New York Times or the Guardian, the BBC, whatever, and if we found out that one of their journalists was part of one of these right-wing racist organizations, right? So if they were part of I almost don't want to say that, but like there's a group called like White Aryan Resistance, right? If we found and who are like terrorist racists. If
Right.
we just
Well,
if we
my
just
country, the KKK, I understand is still around.
Yeah, so let's say we discovered that there was a New York Times. I don't know why they'd be working for the New York Times, but let's say that we found out one of them was one of these strange KKK people. There would be such an uproar about it, and even the New York Times, for whatever else is wrong with them, I would have to think would really sort of turn themselves inside out to discover sort of how they'd done this. I don't think Al Jazeera is going to be doing anything of the sort.
Yeah, nor will the Guardian or the BBC or the New York Times or CNN. They won't, the point is they may have these superficial reports, and I do expect superficial reports. Israel claims, Israel claims, Israel claims. Um, oh, Maybe at best we'll get laptop pictures may indicate we'll get something like that. They'll have the picture of the report of this Al Jazeera reporter holding this weapon, that weapon, adjusting this other weapon, carrying this other weapon over. And the photographs may indicate, Morgan, that an Al Jazeera reporter might have had something to do, but poor Al Jazeera couldn't have known. No, 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 no. As I say, if you're Al Jazeera, who are you assigning to go on to do on-scene reporting in Gaza right now? I presumptively now, it will be my presumption now that Al Jazeera has, in fact, sent someone who's going to actively help the terrorists in the area. They wouldn't send anyone else.
Absolutely. So just as we're in our final few minutes, we have $1 from Bonnie. Thank you so much, Bonnie. Um, and then just to say to people, we have the reality show coming up after this, of course, the title of which is Saving the Hostages Can't Be the Main Goal. And that's obviously based around the news that, which is the salutary news which came out about the lives of two hostages being saved. And so whilst obviously we're going to be celebrating that, we're going to be just digging into what Israel's priorities should be in the conflict. Um, and so, James, is there anything else on this story that you think people should think about?
Well, write your MPs, write your members of Congress, tell them that you want the press credentials of Al Jazeera to be revoked. You don't want them to be treated as a legitimate international news agency anymore by your government. And I would, and of course, subscribe to us here. You're getting a perspective here that you're not going to get anywhere else. You really are, ladies and gentlemen. And if you find this of value, please hit like, share, and especially subscribe. And do consider becoming a paid subscriber to the Ayn Rand Center United Kingdom. We're giving you a perspective you'll not find anywhere else. I promise.
Absolutely. And so you can become a member either through the YouTube channel, which helps us very much, or directly as a ARC UK member, which brings you a range of benefits as well. Well, okay, James, thank you so much for chatting with me today. The Daily Objective will be back tomorrow, and I hope everyone sticks around for the reality show, which starts in just a few minutes. I'm going to run off and make myself a coffee because I'm still a bit sleepy.